Obsession has finally hit theaters. I think it's the best horror movie of 2026, and I really love the story and these characters. I think it brings up a lot of good ethical questions, and I'd really like to talk about it in depth. So, spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want to be spoiled, feel free to come back later. We're introduced to our main character, Bear. He comes off as a very anxious, kind of reserved guy. He's like a good guy. We're immediately introduced to the fact that he has a huge crush on his friend and colleague Nikki, and he is bouncing off ideas with his best friend Ian, trying to figure out how to tell her. And Ian's like, dude, just tell her, just ask her out, ask her to grab a drink. But Bear's overthinking it, and he's like, I have to find the best way to tell her. You see that he's given multiple opportunities just to tell Nikki how he feels throughout the entire night. He even asks him, hey Bear, do you like me? Because if you like me, you should tell me now. And Bear chickens out, and he's like, oh, well, I think we're great friends. So he chickens out. He's not assertive enough to tell her how he feels, and he brings out the One Wish Willow. To his defense, he doesn't actually think that this is actually going to grant a wish, right? It's a novelty toy. I think we've all made wishes off of things just because we knew it wasn't actually going to work out, but it actually does. And immediately, he can tell something's not right. And that's the moment when I think he is ethically responsible for what happens to Nikki going forward. Because he knows that he made a wish, he could see that she's acting differently, but he just kind of goes along with it. And even when they're kissing for the first time, she freaks out, snaps out of it, and then snaps back into her freaky Nikki persona. And he knows hey, this isn't right. He even points out, you made me feel like I was taking advantage of you. And she's like, no, 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 you're not taking advantage of me. But he knows deep down that he is, because this isn't exactly Nikki. But he's not really quite sure what's going on yet. He just knows he made this wish, and she's most likely making out with him, not of her own sound mind. Something else is going on. But again, he's finally getting what he wants. He's finally getting this new relationship with someone he's loved for so long, and he just kind of goes with it. His friends start noticing. They bring up multiple times, multiple people are like, think you're taking advantage of Nikki. We think you're taking advantage of the situation. Clearly she's not doing well. Clearly she's not of sound mind. And Bear's just like, no, she's really into me. She's coming on to me. He keeps making excuses for what's happening between him and Nikki. As more weird stuff starts happening, he really cannot ignore the fact that this is not right, that this is not Nikki. And when he calls the One Wish Willow Company to ask, what's going on? Can I revise the wish? And they're like, we don't do that. That's not how this works. And then he finds out that the only way to break Nikki of this weird curse is to unalive himself so that she can finally be free, but she'll always be like this as long as he lives. And then he actually hears what's going on with Nikki. She's screaming in pain. So he knows she's being suppressed somewhere, in some weird hellscape or something. We don't really know exactly where she is, but we know that whatever he's hooking up with, that's not Nikki. So that weird sinking suspicion that he's had this entire time that yeah, this isn't exactly consensual, nor is it ethically right, is very much confirmed, because again, he knows that that's not Nikki. They go to the party, weird stuff starts happening, and then Nikki tries to hurt herself because she snaps out of it again. We can tell that the real Nikki really wants to get out of this situation. And when they go back to his house, they're in bed. Freaky Nikki falls asleep, and then the real Nikki starts talking to Bear, and she's begging him, please, please end my suffering. Please, please unalive me. This is the moment where I really disliked Bear, because Bear, very resentful, goes, is it really that bad being with me, loving me? And Nikki goes, I haven't been with you at all this entire time. That's not me. He just leaves the room while Nikki is crying out in pain to end her suffering. And then, of course, we know what happens. He meets up with Sarah. Sarah doesn't exactly make it. Freaky Nikki shows up and does what Freaky Nikki does. And then things are just so real that Bear goes back to the store. He's trying to find another One Wish Willow to make another wish. Wish basically that none of this ever happened. And they let him know one wish per customer. And so he finds Ian, begs him to make the wish. Ian, of course, wishes for money because he obviously doesn't think that this is real. Bear is stuck with the realization that if he wants this to end, he has to basically convince Nikki to make the wish for herself. He realizes that that's not going to happen. So much stuff has happened. Now Ian is deceased. He goes into the bathroom and he's really faced with no other choice but to take a bunch of pills and just kind of end it. But then he hears that One Wish Willow jingle, and we realize that Nikki has also made a wish that Bear would love her more than anyone in the world. And they go out, but of course it's too late because Bear has taken all the pills. He passes away, and the real Nikki is finally freed from whatever curse she was under. But then, of course, look at the mess she's in. Poor Nikki. Such an interesting dilemma, and Bear is just that classic nice guy, good guy archetype because he wanted someone he couldn't have. Got together in a really shady way. When she was acting kind of strange, he started losing interest in her. Even after knowing the amount of pain that the actual Nikki was in, he was still showing that resentfulness towards her when she was crying out in pain. don't want to hate Bear because it's clear that he's going through some stuff. Like, he clearly has some mental health issues. He's dealing with some depression, anxiety. We can tell by his medicine cabinet. But just the decisions he makes in this movie is borderline like essay. You can argue some very unethical stuff has happened in this movie. Again, I don't necessarily fault him for the initial wish because he probably didn't realize that that was actually going to work. But everything after that, yeah, it was his fault. And from the very beginning of that movie, we can tell immediately that Nikki was not at all interested in him, very much was interested in Ian. Even at the beginning of the movie, we see like these photo booth pictures that he's in the photo with Nikki. She does not look at all interested in Barrett, but when Ian's in the photo, she's like all over him. So it just cleared the dynamics of this friend group. Nikki has liked Ian. Ian's kind of a fuckboy. Sarah really likes Bear, and Bear doesn't realize that and doesn't take notice of her until all the stuff with Nikki is happening. One reason I really like Obsession because it raises so many like weird ethical questions, and you wonder like, what would you do in that situation? What would you do if you found out that there was really only way out for the person that you supposedly love? Like, would you make that sacrifice? I really like these characters, and even Bear has some very redeemable qualities, but overall, you can kind of make the argument that he made some very unethical decisions in this movie, and he's not exactly the good guy that he portrays himself to be.